Hello cadets and welcome back to the Academy. Today we're talking about a fundamental aspect of Imperial Assault Skirmish, list building. There are many different types of lists you can build in Imperial Assault, but in this video I'm going to show you a basic structural outline that you can use to build solid functional skirmish lists. Please note that this is simply a blueprint that I have found to be consistently effective when building my own lists for competitive play, and that I have also observed in lists created by players who are much better than me. This is not something that must be dogmatically adhered to, but is more of a guideline that can be used for basic list building and deviated from when the time comes. But to be honest, I find that the best lists in the game tend to hew closely to this basic list building structure, and is a guideline that I still apply to all of my own list building. So let's take a look. The most common list building mistake I see from struggling players is an imbalance between their offensive and support figures. While you need offensive figures to deal and soak up damage on the front lines, you also need support figures and upgrades to maximize the effectiveness of your offensive figures and the performance of your list as a whole. Too much offensive figures will leave the power level of your list spread too thinly across too many figures, and too much support will leave you without enough offensive staying power in the late game. The basic structure that I recommend following with your list building is 30 points in offense and 10 points in pure support, with about 2 points of wiggle room either way. A list's offense components can be further broken down into 20 to 25 of those 30 points spent on pure offense, and 5 to 10 points spent on hybrid offense support figures. It's important while building a list to be able to identify what role each figure is fulfilling in your list. Is it a pure offensive figure, a pure support figure, or a figure that wants to do both? Identifying what role a figure plays in a list is important not only in the list building stage, but also in playing that figure correctly during an actual mission. Pure offense are things like Han Solo, Darth Vader, Weequay Pirates, Jet Troopers, Ahsoka, Onar, Greedo, etc. These figures' primary role is to deal damage in high quantities. For the most part, all of their abilities are centered around increasing their own damage output or buffing their own defenses. Hybrid offense figures are things like Hera, Kotun, Thrawn, Palpatine, Death Troopers, Elite Jawa, Elite Claudite, etc. These figures have abilities that let them support the other figures in the list, but they can also reliably deal 3 or more damage to a black die figure with an unmodded attack. Because these figures have such great non-combat abilities, they are often going to act as your pinch hitters, staying back in the early game and making attacks of opportunity in the late game to finish off damaged figures that your main attackers weren't able to. When filling out the offensive section of your list, don't skimp on ranged attackers, even in a list primarily focused around melee fighters. Pure melee is tough to manage because they usually end up giving up just as many points as they score when they have to expose themselves to enemy fire in order to attack. Having a ranged figure or two in your pocket gives you flexibility in the early and late game to attack from a safe distance and pick off injured figures that try to run away. It's important to have enough pure support in a list as well. You can't build a list that's just 40 points of attacking figures because you can't win with just unmodified attacks. Pure support figures act as both force multipliers for your attackers and safety valves for shoring up bad matchups and capitalizing on favorable missions. Support figures can hold terminals and help smooth out your command card draw, give your offensive figures extra movement, help score bonus VPs, and pad out your list activation count with cheap figures. You want your list to have a minimum of 6 activations, because even though it's true that you can pass in the first round to lessen the disadvantage of having fewer activations than your opponent, when the fighting breaks out in round 2 and it becomes much worse to pass, you want to be able to react and respond to your opponent's activations and not having them make 3 to 4 activations to which you have no way to respond. Let's take a look at some successful example lists and see how they compare to my list building blueprint. Here we have Ryan Janway's list from the recent Nova Open, an archetype commonly known as Han's Heroes. We have a main attacking force of Han, Drokata, Sabine, totaling 26 points. Hera has a good attack, but not as good as the other 3 figures, and has a lot of utility in her support abilities, bringing our total offensive points to 30, with 4 of that in a hybrid offense figure. Then we have our pure support figures, which are contributing to the list through their abilities rather than their attacks, with Gideon, 3PO, R2, Doubt, and extra armor adding up to 10 points, fitting neatly into our blueprint here. Let's look at another list from the Nova Open, this time semi-finalist Jason Breguet with his Scum list. And we'll start with the support figures this time. Jason's got Jabba, 3PO, Beast Tamer, and Temporary Alliance for a total of 10 points. Then his offensive figures are Sabine, Onar, Greedo, and 2 elite Lothcats. Now, if we consider Onar to be a pure offense figure, which I do, then it might not look like Jason has any hybrid figures in his list. But look at the Lothcats again. Based on the way Jason played this list during the tournament, always having one group using Fresh Catch to power up the other group, and then launching cats into the opponent's figures one at a time with Beast Tamer and Pounce, I'd argue that in each round there was one group of Lothcats acting as support figures, while the other group acted offensively, which perfectly fits my definition of what a hybrid offense support figure is. However, not every list needs to follow this template to be successful. There are deviations. We can look again at the Nova Open Finals at Average Joe Gamer's list to find an exception. Here we have a list that has invested a whopping 18 points in pure support figures, with MHD, 2 Alliance Smugglers rounding out the care package of Gideon, 3PO, and R2. And out of Joe's 22 points of offensive figures, only Han would really be considered a pure offense figure, with Leia being more of a hybrid figure supporting the list with battlefield leadership and military efficiency, as her attack profile actually closely aligns with Hera's. With this list, Average Joe Gamer is using a more niche strategy of having a large cadre of support figures supporting a single hyper-offensive figure, keeping that figure alive and attacking for as long as possible. This is an extremely advanced strategy though, and requires an extremely high skill level and special tactics to pull off effectively, compared to a more well-rounded list. Well, I hope this has given you a new and interesting way to look at how you build your lists in Imperial Assault Skirmish. Do your Skirmish lists line up with this kind of template already, or do you have a different methodology for building your Skirmish lists? Raise your hand and let me know in the comments. Otherwise, class dismissed.